I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Let's talk tariffs, American tariffs, and Trump. The Trump administration has tariffs now against China. He actually has them with Turkey as well. He announced tariffs against India. And of course, the big bombshell story was the tariffs against Mexico, 5% every month if Mexico does not stop the flow of immigration. Alexander, what do you make of this move?
Well, first of all, I think it's a sensational move, and I think the markets are reacting to it being a sensational move. And it's classic Trump. I mean, it seemed to come out of nowhere. Actually, I'm sure it hasn't come out of nowhere. I'm sure he and his team have been planning this for a very, very long time. And there are both politics behind this and economics behind this. I mean, politics, we talked about it just before we started, and you made the entirely correct and proper point that Donald Trump has been trying with might and main to create his wall across the border to stop this immigration crisis. He's been sabotaged from doing it by the Democrats within the US, despite the fact that it was something that he campaigned on and got elected on. And of course, the Mexicans have been doing pretty much nothing to stop it happening either. So, as you absolutely properly said just before we spoke, he's now slapped on them another type of wall in the form of these tariffs. And
he built the wall.
He's built the wall, and he's done it by linking it directly to the immigration issue, which I think is absolutely sensational. But I have to say with Donald Trump that I think it goes beyond the immigration thing, because though I would stress, I think the immigration thing is a very important one for him. But I mean, I think, firstly, he's now planted a bomb under NAFTA too, which he'd been maneuvered by various people, I think very much against his better judgment, into negotiating. And by imposing these tariffs on Mexico, I think he's taken a huge step beyond those other tariffs that we've seen that he's imposed on other countries, because the United States doesn't do a huge amount of trade with India. Turkey also. The United States does some trade with Turkey, but not that much. China, it does a huge amount of trade with, but you could always argue, and I have argued, that beyond the economics, there is a geopolitical dimension to this. I think with Mexico, you can't talk about a geopolitical dimension. There's the immigration dimension, certainly, but I think that there is clearly now an economic agenda, which is to move away from free trade, to move away from economic globalization, to move back to protecting the heartland, the economic heartland of the United States, by pursuing reindustrialization there and doing it the same way in which the United States industrialized before, as it did in the 19th century and the early 20th century, when it industrialized behind a wall of tariffs. So in a sense, this is the first clear-cut sign that this long period of the United States embracing free trade, which it basically started to do in a concerted way in the 1960s, reversing its own old policy of protectionism, is now that period is now ended, and the United States under Donald Trump is heading back to its old traditional economic policy of prioritizing the heartland, building it up, and erecting tariffs to keep foreign goods out.
Now that the Mueller investigation is finished, Alexander, and okay, maybe the establishment media and the Democrats can't get over it, but obviously Trump is over it. In my opinion, I think he is, even though he'll make statements now and then. I really see him now that he is trying to get some policy pushed forward. And he had a meeting with Pelosi on infrastructure. He walked out of that meeting because Pelosi just can't get, the whole Russiagate thing out of her head. So Trump said, I'm done with you. And I think he basically sent the signal, I'm ready to enact some policy. I can't work with the Democrats. It's obvious now. So are we seeing Trump's crystallization
Yes.
of his Make America Great Again kind of campaign slogan? I mean, it may be idealistic, and I want you to let me know and to let our viewers know if you think it's even possible
Yes.
to bring that manufacturing glory that the United States once had, back to the heartland, which is his base, and back to the United States. But is this Trump's attempt to maybe put a check mark behind, the greatest campaign promise that he's made or a president has made in decades, which is the MAGA slogan?
Absolutely. I think it is exactly correct. I mean, the first 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency were Donald Trump trying to get control of the government, which was resisting him at every conceivable turn, putting his own people in place, and he had enormous trouble finding the right people, and getting his agenda forward because he was completely paralyzed by Russiagate. I mean, whatever he did, it always ended up going back to Russiagate. And he always had this spectre of an impeachment case being brought against him on the basis not of some flimsy obstruction charge, which is going to get nowhere, but on the basis that he was actually an agent of the Kremlin, which is crazy. But I mean, an awful lot of people believed it. And there was always that worry that somewhere, somehow, Mueller was going to come up with something that could be sold as proving that. Now, Mueller has failed. And I really want to make this point very clearly, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're hearing all this rumbling from the Democrats about impeachment and all this rumbling about obstruction. It won't fly. It won't fly in the Senate. It won't fly with the Republicans in the House. I think only one Republican there has supported it, and it certainly won't fly with the Republican electorate across the United States. And not just the Republican electorate, but I think a lot of the independent voters also. Yeah. Exactly. I think Donald Trump understands this very well. So now he feels his hands are free, finally, to start doing what he was elected to do. And he wants to emphasize the whole business of rebuilding the heartland. Now, it is a traditional Republican policy. Republican presidents, before the New Deal, always supported tariffs. That was the program that of the Republican Party, and it was in fact one which had a great deal of consensus behind it at one time. I mean, there was even a name for it. It was called Americanism. I think I'm right in saying that the founders, Alexander Hamilton, for example, of the United States, that we hear so much about, he was not a supporter of free trade or of Adam Smith's economic ideas. These all came from Britain. They were adopted by the United States in the 1960s as part of the policy of integrating the world economy, or integrating the world economy around the United States to fight the Cold War. And I think what Donald Trump says is that the result was that it bled the industrial base of the United States dry. And now is the time when we reverse that. We bring back these trade barriers, we re-establish protection, because that's what it is, and we rebuild the heartland. Now, will it work? Well, I'm more skeptical about that. I think the problem is that with the extent of globalization that has taken place now, with these very complicated supply chains that exist, with economic competitors of the United States, like China and Russia coming together now to form these great Eurasian blocs, also able, like the United States, to organize on a continental scale, but with even bigger economies of scale than the United States has. We are no longer in a situation that existed when these kind of economic policies were tried out before, because I think that the United States risks finding if it goes down this course, that it will actually isolate itself from the pulse, the heart of the world economy, and that the major innovations and industrial development doesn't happen in the United States, that it happens elsewhere, and that the United States will be left isolated and will be diminished. Now, I say all of that. I want to make it very clear that I don't definitely know that that is what is going to happen. There is a more coherent economic philosophy behind what Donald Trump is doing than I think some people acknowledge. But I do want to reiterate a point which I made when we did our live on Friday, that I simply cannot see how these policies that Donald Trump is following now can be reconciled with the continuance of the reserve currency status of the dollar. I think Donald Trump probably understands that. If he doesn't, then I'm afraid he must learn that very fast. And I think that if he's going to press on with his protectionist policy, the first thing he has to do is address the reality that the reserve currency status of the dollar is coming to an end.
Well, that's a whole nother video in and of itself, a huge video
Absolutely,
right there,
absolutely,
Alexander.
absolutely.
But let's tie this one up then.
No.
What are the differences between Mexico and China?
Right.
As you see, as Trump is now, putting these tariffs into place, and they're going to start negotiating. And do you see either Mexico, China, or both coming to the table and finally giving some ground to Trump's demands?
I think, first of all, let's talk about the differences between China and Mexico. They are radically different. China is a huge economic power. What it exports to the United States are finished goods. China exports products, completed products, industrial products, which the United States buys. What Mexico does is that it exports many things, but an awful lot of it are subcomponents that move backwards and forwards across the border. I mean, it's very interesting to see the way that goods, these sort of goods move backwards. They don't necessarily move in one direction. They'll start in Mexico, they'll go to the United States, they'll be updated in the United States, they go back to Mexico, then they go back to the United States. But the point is, they are mainly finished in the United States itself. Mexico has functioned as an economic province of the United States, providing cheap labor to the larger US economy. China may have started like that in the 1990s, but it has long since evolved beyond that point. If these tariffs remain in place, which I predict they will, then I think Mexico faces enormous problems. And I think that the Mexicans will do everything they possibly can and will offer every conceivable concession that they can to get these tariffs lifted. I don't think that Donald Trump is very much in a mood to lift them. And if he doesn't lift them, then I think Mexico is going to have very hard times ahead.
Well, the terms are pretty much if they can stop the migration, correct?
Well, yes.
Or is there more to it?
Yeah. Well,
and we're not talking about the Mexicans migrating to the U.S. We're talking about Central America passing through Mexico and making their way up to the U.S. as well.
Yes, well, exactly. Well, first of all, I think the Mexicans will undoubtedly try and do what they can on the immigration issue, which, by the way, if it works, is already a big gain for Donald Trump.
It's a huge win for Trump if it works.
It's a huge win for Trump if it works, and I think they will try to do that. But, I can't help but think that the problems in Mexico are such that the Mexicans will do just enough to show weakness, but not enough to satisfy Trump. Because, as I said, I think behind the immigration thing, he also has this greater economic agenda. And at that point, I think they will continue to make concessions, but I don't think they will do enough to satisfy him. And not just Donald Trump, but people like Navarro, his economic advisor, other people within the administration also. And I think at the end of the day, I think more likely than not, we will see these tariffs stay. And by the way, there will definitely be a great deal of economic turbulence because the United States will obviously lose the advantage of being able to import these goods from Mexico. But the US will adapt. It's a huge economy. It can absorb this. And it will give Donald Trump a very, very powerful message to take when he goes on campaign. He'll be able to travel to industrial states and he will be able to say, look, I stand with you. I'm actually doing something for you. Joe Biden wouldn't do what I'm doing. Bernie Sanders wouldn't do what I'm doing. They're criticizing me for doing it.
Good point.
And I think come 2020, that will carry a lot of traction with a lot of voters in the US, even some who might be hurting in the short term.
Yep. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop. Pick up a t-shirt or a polo shirt embroidered with our logo like the one that Alexander is wearing.
Like
that
this
shirt?
one here. Absolutely. I think it's a fantastic shirt. As I pointed out on several videos, I mean, I used to be more before, but, to some extent still somebody who liked to go and buy nice clothes. I was always very dapper. And I know where to buy all the best things, and good things anyway, in London. And I can absolutely say that this polo shirt is very high quality. I mean, it's 100% cotton. It's beautifully embroidered here with our logo, our Duran logo, which is the double-headed eagle. It fits beautifully. My wife loves me in it. And it's extraordinarily comfortable. It's extraordinarily comfortable in the kind of very hot weather that we're having. And it's also very comfortable in the sort of cooler weather that you can also have. At the moment, it's very hot here in London. Other days, it's cooler, and it's been extremely comfortable to wear on both. And I would also add that if you want shirts that are adapted for cooler weather, still, we also have long-sleeved shirts as well, which are equally exceptional quality as this one, fit equally well, and are perfectly adapted for cooler weather too.
Yeah, we have long sleeve, we have hoodies, but for the summer, we're also coming out with tank tops as well as Alexander, and more t-shirts, which are coming up
there you go.
Very, very soon.
All of very high quality and very highly recommended.
Yeah, and when it's a warm day for the summer, you can always drink that cold beer in one of the mugs that you have.
Indeed. Now I'm going to show
not
you
just for coffee.
I've got both of them. I've got which is the Duran mug, which has our logo, which is the double-headed eagle, which points in both directions because we cover both east and west. We cover all points of the compass. We're a geopolitical site that isn't just Western oriented, but we've also got the Moscow symbol with St. George slaying the dragon of untruth. There, he's the patron saint of Moscow. He's the patron saint of Greece and the patron saint of England. And he's a warrior, as I said, who slays untruth, which is what we try to do in the Duran. And of course, there's the eagle, the double-headed eagle, which is Moscow's eagle, but it's also ours because, as I said, we talk both to the east and to the west. We cover all points of the compass, and these are magnificent mugs, beautifully made, really strong, wonderful to hold in one's hand. I tend to drink tea from them. My wife drinks coffee, but you could certainly drink beer. And on a hot day like this, that's exactly what I'm going to do after we finish this program.
And of course, you can donate to us on PayPal and Patreon as well. That also helps us out. The links are in the description box down below. And you can follow us on Instagram, the Duran_com. And Alexander, we also have an ebook on our website. The link is in the description box down below on our shop, actually. And you wrote the foreword to that ebook, which deals with Brexit. Do you want to say a couple of quick words about the foreword that you wrote and the ebook?
Well, indeed. I mean, the point about the ebook is that it brings together a lot of what we've been writing and saying about Brexit for a long time, and the foreword sort of brings it all together and summarizes it. And the reason we did this is because we feel that as a news site, we have covered and explained Brexit really well, better than most people. We predicted way back in 2016, right after the referendum result, that if the result of the Brexit referendum, which was a democratic vote, was not implemented by the British establishment, there would be a political crisis, a legitimacy crisis in Britain, and that there would be a rise of a new political force sweeping the board across England and Wales, throwing the old establishment, sweeping it away in front of it. And that is exactly what has happened with the rise of Nigel Farage and of the Brexit Party. And you'll see in this book how we chart the course. We explain all these ludicrous machinations that the political class in Britain has engaged in to try to stop Brexit. And we explain the inevitable and inexorable response from the people who voted for Brexit in that referendum, that has provoked, and the way in which this explains the crisis in England. So if you want to understand Brexit better, and you also want to support us so that we can continue to do what we have done, buy this book. It's considerably less than the price of a cup of coffee in some of the cafes you will find in London.
And it's a good read. It's a very good read. That's right. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.